Let me show you how to make a bolognese-style lasagna from start to finish, making everything from scratch. I'm going to show you how to make the pasta sheets, the ragu, and the bechamel. Start by preparing a sofrito. Finely chop 2 carrots, 2 stalks of celery, and 1 large red onion. I've used my food processor because I like them very fine. I'm using red onion in this recipe because that's what's typically used in Italy, but if you have brown or white onions or even shallots, you can use those in place. To a large heavy bottom pot, add about 2 tablespoons, around 30 milliliters of a good quality olive oil. Turn that on to medium-high heat. When your olive oil comes to temperature, add in your carrots, onion, and celery, and then give that a good stir and give it a little sprinkling of salt. The salt at this stage helps to draw the moisture out of the vegetables so they start to steam. And you'll notice I didn't add any garlic to this recipe. Not every Italian dish has garlic in it, but I won't be mad if you want to add a little bit in. While this is cooking, let's get onto our meat. You want to blend together your pork and your beef. And the reason I do this is so that you have an even flavor throughout the entire dish and you don't just get bits of beef or bits of pork. I'm using a 2-to-1 ratio of ground beef to ground pork. If you can't find ground pork, because sometimes it can be a challenge, you could use Italian sausage in its place.
I'm using 1 kilogram, around 2 pounds of beef, and 500 grams, around 1 pound of pork. Your hands are a great tool for this job, but I sometimes just pop it into my KitchenAid mixer and let it do this job for me. You'll want to be sure to use a good quality, high-fat beef for this recipe, at least 10% fat. This really helps add to the flavor, and you can drain off some of the fat later. Once the meat is evenly mixed, it's ready for the next stage.
Place a large sauté or frying pan on medium-high to high heat and add in another 2 tablespoons, 30 milliliters of olive oil. I'm going to have to do this in batches because I have so much meat to cook. And if you add too much meat to the pan, you won't get that browning.
When you add the meat to the pan, press it down into the pan with the back of your spoon. This makes sure you have the most surface area touching the pan to get all of those crispy brown bits. Now leave the meat alone so it can start to brown. I've slightly turned down the heat on my sofrito so it doesn't burn, but make sure to give it a stir every now and again. Once you have a nice browning on the bottom side of your meat, flip it over and cook the other side. This should only take a few minutes. Now that it's caramelized on both sides, start breaking up your meat with a wooden spoon. I sometimes even use a potato masher for this job to get the pieces extra fine. Now's a great time to go in with a paper towel and soak up some of that fat if you're worried about the fat content. Using a slotted spoon, add your cooked meat to your pot with the sofrito, and then continue cooking the rest of your meat in the exact same way. You may need to add another drizzle of olive oil if your pan is a little bit dry.
Now, every family has their own variations and recipes for a ragu. Ragu basically means a slow-cooked meat sauce. In England, this would be known as a bolognese, but technically it's not a bolognese recipe. That's a very highly protected recipe by the Italian government, and it includes things like milk. So this is just a standard ragu that you can use in any of your dishes.
Once all of the meat has been added, give it a good stir so that the meat and the sofrito come together. Then add in 2 tablespoons, 30 grams of tomato paste. I like to make a little well in the bottom of my meat so that the tomato paste really hits the heat. It helps to cook out the raw flavor and gives a really nice balance to the sauce. After about a minute or so, you can start stirring the tomato paste into the rest of the mixture. It's important to season at every layer, so go ahead and add in a pinch or 2 of salt. Add in a half a cup or 125 milliliters of a good quality Italian red wine, one that you'd like to drink. This adds real body and flavor to the sauce.
I like the flavor that wine brings to this dish, and I like that it helps to break down the meat. But it's not necessary in this recipe if you tend to not use wine in your cooking. Just leave it out completely.
Let the wine cook and evaporate almost completely before adding in your tomatoes. I'm adding in 2 700-gram jars, around 5.5 cups of tomato passata.
I'm using a good quality passata for this recipe. Some of you may know that as tomato puree or just tomato sauce. If you make your own tomato sauce, you can just use that instead of passata. Use your favorite.
And don't waste any of the passata that's still in the jar. Fill each jar about halfway with water and give it a shake with the lid on to remove any excess tomato. Then add that to your pot. Give that a really good stir and make sure none of the meat is sticking to the bottom of the pot. It's important to keep an eye on your sauce throughout the cooking process, so give it a stir every now and again. If your sauce is looking too thick at any point during the cooking process, add in a little more water. At this stage, I'm adding in my aromatics. Add in 2 bay leaves. I'm adding in a few teaspoons of my aromatic salt to make this extra delicious.
If you're not using my aromatic salt recipe, you're going to want to elevate those flavors somehow. So add in the bay leaves, a stick of rosemary, and some sage. You can even add the entire peel off of a lemon into the mix. If I'm doing this, I like to tie them together in a bouquet garni so they're easy to fish out at the end. But if you do want to make my aromatic salt, I've linked my recipe in the description below.
You can always adjust the seasoning and add more salt at the end of the cooking process, but because it's going to cook for such a long time, those flavors are really going to multiply, so don't over-season at this point. Once your sauce starts to bubble, turn the heat right down to low, pop the lid on so it's slightly ajar, and let this cook for at least 4 hours, or up to 12.
I find this sauce is even better after it's rested a day or 2 in the fridge, but you could also store it in your freezer. I like to pop mine in individual cubes or bags so that they're ready and portion sized when I need to use them. Let me show you how to make one of the 5 classic sauces, bechamel or white sauce. This creamy, delicious sauce adds so much texture and flavor to whatever you use it in. Into a heavy bottom sauté or saucepan, get your heat up to medium high and start melting 50 grams of butter. Traditionally, you wouldn't want to get any browning on your butter because you want this to be a pure white sauce, but I like that little bit of caramelization on it, so I'm going to let mine go just a tiny bit brown. Be patient, it has to melt completely. Once we've got a nice sizzle on the butter, go in with 50 grams of plain or all-purpose flour. You want to use a 1-to-1 ratio with the flour to butter. And now just whisk it in until all of the flour and the butter comes together, and we're going to let that cook out slightly, so it's going to look quite thick and lumpy, and that's just going to help cook any of that raw flour out. So just let it go. Don't stress about it. Just give it a few mixes.
You can see here the mixture is starting to get dry and a little bit clumpy, and that's what we want. You don't want to brown it too much for this recipe, just a little bit for that extra nuttiness. But if you were cooking a dish, say from the southern US, you'd actually cook this for up to an hour until it was a really deep, dark brown caramelized color.
And what I like to do to make sure that my roux is nice and smooth, I don't get any lumps in my bechamel, is I just add a little bit of the milk. Kind of like if you were making egg whites, it's your sacrificial milk. So maybe just a few tablespoons, get them in there, and it will start to loosen up all of those lumps. So you can see now they've kind of come together in a big clump. But that milk that you've put in there is going to help the rest of it mix in when you add the rest of your milk. So in we go, we're going in with 500 milliliters of whole fat milk. And you can just add this all at once, keep it cold, it will break down all of those little lumps, and just keep stirring. Your ratio is 1 part butter to 1 part flour to 10 parts whole milk. And you want to make sure you're using whole milk. So if you're making less or more, those are the ratios you need to know. Just keep mixing until all of those lumps disappear, and they will. You just need to give it a little bit of elbow grease.
Turn your heat right down to low and continue whisking so those little lumps can cook into the mixture. Make sure you're getting into all of the edges so there's no little bits of roux sticking around.
Now that all of my lumps are gone, I'm going to season the bechamel. So I'm going in with about half a teaspoon of white pepper, and I'm using white because it's got a little bit more of a delicate flavor, but if you have black pepper and that's all you have, just use that. And then I'm going in with quite a healthy grating of a fresh knob of nutmeg. I would say probably about a half a teaspoon of this as well. You traditionally would add nutmeg to this recipe. It really does add a little je ne sais quoi to the sauce. It might add a little bit of color, but it's definitely worth it for the flavor. And freshly ground is always best. And then I'm going to go in with just a little pinch of salt. You don't need much because the butter was already salted. And just give that a stir to combine.
And then turn your heat back up to medium to help it thicken.
This shouldn't take very long now, just 5 to 10 minutes. Make sure you're stirring fairly regularly so that you don't get any burnt bits or stuck on bits in the corners of your pans. You can see it's really starting to thicken up now. I'm gonna give this another minute or so and then it will be ready.
You'll know it's done when it coats the back of a spoon really well. So if I go in with a wooden spoon, you can see it really clings to the back of it. And if I run my finger down, the sauce doesn't move inwards. Turn off your heat, your bechamel's ready.
The great thing about this sauce is you can make it in advance, at least a day or two in advance. And you can use it from cold, or if you want it a little runnier, you can warm it up.
I'm adding about 50 grams or half a cup of finely grated Parmigiano Reggiano to the sauce. You wouldn't normally add cheese to a bechamel. That makes it a Mornay sauce. Because I'm making lasagna with this, I want the Parmigiano flavor to be throughout the whole dish. And now that you've added in all of your cheese, it's a great time to taste your sauce and adjust the seasonings as necessary.
Mine needs just a little pinch of salt. Perfetto. Let me show you how to make the perfect pasta sheets to elevate your lasagna to the next level. On your work surface, tip out 400 grams of tipo 00 flour. If you only have all-purpose, that's fine too, but this will just make a more delicate pasta. And create a well in the middle of your flour. Then crack 4 eggs. You want 1 egg for every 100 grams of pasta. I like to do this in the bowl just in case I get any shells in there. I can easily pull them out instead of them ruining my flour. And then I dump those straight into the well. Break up your eggs and give them a little mix. And then slowly start incorporating the flour from the inside edge of your well. You'll notice I didn't add any salts to this, and that's because we salt the pasta water instead of the pasta itself. And the reason for that is sometimes those fine granules of salt can cause tears in your pasta, especially when you're rolling them as thin as we're going to roll this. And just continue adding the flour, piano piano. And you can do this in a food processor if that's easier or more accessible to you.
But this is how my Nonna always did it, and that's how I learned how to make it. Once the mixture starts to thicken, you can break the walls of your flour well, but not before that. You don't want the egg running all over your counter.
It's also important to note that I've used large eggs for this recipe. If you're using smaller than large, you might need an extra egg in there for the extra liquid. And now I'm just going to start bringing it together with my hands until it comes into a dough. And I like to use a bench scraper to make sure that anything that might have stuck to my work surface comes up. A bench scraper is an amazing tool in the kitchen. If you haven't got one and you do enjoy cooking, I would highly recommend getting one. And just keep kneading your dough, picking up the flour as you go, until you have a nice, smooth dough.
If you're doing this by hand, you'll have to knead it at least 10 minutes to make sure all of the dry bits are incorporated. If you find your dough is a little sticky, you can add in a bit more flour, but only a teaspoon at a time. You don't want to add too much.
And while I'm kneading, I like to just push the dough away from myself and then fold it back onto itself again. I find that's the best way to knead pasta dough. And because you're pushing away, you can use your body to help get the momentum you need. You'll know you're almost ready and finished kneading when you stop getting so many tears on the top of your dough. You can see here we've got quite a few. We need to go a little bit further with this.
We still have a few pocks and dimples in our dough, so cover it up with your bowl and set it aside.
This now needs to rest for 10 minutes just so those glutens can start to relax. Our dough's been resting for about 10 minutes and we're going to knead it for another minute or two just to get that nice smooth outside that we're looking for. You can tell it's already getting softer just by resting it. It kneads so much easier after that little resting period. And just look, instantly our dough is so much smoother. You just want to make sure it's nice and smooth, soft and supple. You can see now the dough is nice and smooth, but when you poke into it, it really bounces up quite quickly. And that means the glutens are still really tight in there and won't make a very nice tender pasta. Now that we've given it a proper knead and it's nice and smooth, let it rest for another 30 minutes so it can really relax and become that beautiful silky pasta. Our dough has rested, it's soft and it's beautiful, and now when you press into it, you can see that indentation really stays. It doesn't come up all the way. That's how we know it's rested enough. We're going to cut this into pieces and start rolling it. This is another great place to use your bench scraper. And I'm probably going to go into 8 because I have quite a lot of pasta here. And then any piece that you're not working with, put it back under your bowl so it doesn't get dry. Now, starting with one piece, flatten it into a bit of a rectangle. This helps the machine when you're rolling it. It helps keep the shape really nicely. And then I'm going to fold it into 3 just to help with that development and the strength of the pasta, and then press it down again. And now that piece is ready to start rolling. I'm going to give our little piece of pasta just a light dusting with some flour so that it doesn't stick when we put it in the machine. You'll want to use flour throughout this process so that nothing sticks. Let's get rolling. If you enjoy making pasta, I'd highly recommend getting a pasta roller. You can get a manual one for pretty inexpensive these days, and it really does help you make your pasta super thin. But if making pasta isn't something you'll do regularly, you can roll it out with a rolling pin. Just roll it as thin as you possibly can. Ideally, you want to be able to see your fingers through the pasta. You're going to start on your thickest setting. So for me, that's the number 8. And you're going to pass this through probably 2 times on each setting. You want as many layers in your lasagna as possible, so you want to make this dough as thin as you possibly can. I can feel my dough is starting to get a little bit sticky, so I'm going to give it a little dusting of flour.
Not too much flour, just a little bit so that it glides smoothly through the roller.
And there's my super thin pasta, almost like a sheet of paper. I'm going to cut this into 3 pieces, and then I can adjust as I'm making my lasagna. If you're making spaghetti, only cut it in half so that you have the right length. But because I'm making lasagna, I'm going to cut it into 3rds. Just makes it more manageable to work with. And then I'm placing it on a flour-lined baking sheet where I'm going to dust it further with more flour. This way we can layer our pasta and it won't stick.
Continue with all of the pieces of your pasta. Flatten it out and fold it over, and slowly work your way down the numbered settings so that your pasta is as thin as possible. Because I'm making lasagna, I'm cutting these down to smaller sizes so that they fit in my pan, and they're easier to cook this way.
Make sure to put a good dusting of flour between every layer of pasta. And if you want to make this in advance, I'd highly suggest putting layers of parchment paper or cling film between the pasta before freezing. This really helps your pasta sheets not stick together. Make sure to add a good amount of salt to your pasta water. And then I've set up my station so that I have my pasta on one side, my boiling water, and then a bowl with cold water on the other side. That way, once the pasta's cooked, I can drop it straight into the cold water. It won't stick together and it will stop the cooking process. So once your water's boiling, drop in a few pieces of your pasta. I usually like to do 3 or 4 at a time. And because it's fresh and super thin, it's only going to take mere moments to cook. We're just looking to blanch it. We don't need to cook it completely at this stage. 30 seconds to a minute is all you need for this pasta. It will continue cooking in the oven. And then into our cold water. My mom always draped the edge of the pasta over the side of the bowl once it had rinsed and cooled so that you could easily pull them up. You may need to top up your cold water if it gets too warm, or do them in batches, whatever works for you. I can tell my water is already getting warm, so I'm going to add a little bit more cold to it. So in the bottom of your dish, you want to start with a layer of your meat sauce. This just makes sure nothing sticks when you add in your pasta.
Just get it all the way around.
And then we're going to start layering our first layer of pasta. So I like to make sure that the water gets drained off a little bit. So I just use my fingers on either side of the sheet and just run it down to get any excess water removed. And then just lay it in your pan. You want to just slightly overlay your pasta so that it's not overlapping too much. And then if you have any excess, just trim it away. And don't worry, there will be room to fit that in later. I just like to leave this on a baking tray or another extra plate while I'm working. And every time I put the pasta down, I like to give it just a little squish so that there's no air in between the layers. Then we're going to go down with more of our ragu. Spread it out. You don't need a lot between the layers. Just make sure you've got a little bit covering all of the pasta. And then we're going to go on with a spoonful or two of our bechamel sauce. And again, just spread that out. A little bit of Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. And at this stage, you could add in mozzarella, you could add in provolone, whatever kind of cheese you like. Parmesan is the more traditional bolognese route. And then another layer. And again, when you get to that pasta layer with no sauce, give it a little squish. You'll be able to feel the air coming out the sides of the pasta. And this is how you get really tender pieces of lasagna, because there's no air, everything really cooks together in there. Then we go on with another layer of your meat sauce. And you just keep doing this over and over and over again until you finish. And don't worry if you have any little tears in your pasta, that's not going to make any difference here at all. On the top layer, I just kind of like to push any bits of pasta down the side, as long as it's not in excess, and give it a good little press down.
And we're not going to add any of the meat sauce on top, just the bechamel and some Parmigiano Reggiano.
E pronto. Now you can put it in the oven just like this for about 45 minutes, but the top's gonna get really crispy, and I like my lasagna to be really moist.
What I do is place a piece of parchment paper over the top and then cover it up with a piece of aluminum foil. Tuck that in around the edges. You can either freeze it like this and then thaw it completely before you're going to bake it, or you can bake it straight away.
I like to put my lasagna on a baking tray just in case there's any bubbling over or spillage. And into the oven.
Into a preheated oven at 200 degrees Celsius or 400 degrees Fahrenheit. This will need to bake for 40 minutes, and then remove the aluminum foil and parchment paper and let it bake another 10 to 15 minutes until the top is golden and crispy.
And these are the bits that everybody fights over, because who doesn't love that little bit of crunch? A great tip to know if your lasagna is hot all the way through is to take a knife and just press it into the center of your lasagna. Hold it there for about 5 to 10 seconds. And then when you pull it out, feel the knife. And if it's hot, then you know your lasagna is cooked through.
When you let the lasagna rest, it doesn't melt apart when you take it out of the pan, so you get properly beautiful pieces of lasagna. And look at how gorgeous those pasta sheets are. It is so tender, you can cut it with a fork.
Who doesn't love a good layered dish? If you're looking for something to finish off this lasagna, you have to try my tiramisu. Thank you so much for watching, and if you found this video helpful, please hit the subscribe button because I come out with a new video every week. See you in the next one.